Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi barakatuhu. Abdul the Abin, we back at it. We gonna go back to Ansari podcast. Shout out to that brother. Very interesting stuff. And I like how he's non-biased. So let's different people come up with a different perspective. Maybe inshallah we have an Ahmadi up there. So this one right here is about the spirit world, dreams, and possibly, even possibly, a prophet built and or designed the pyramids. Imhotep would actually be the ancient Egyptian form of Muslim. Imhotep was supposed to be the originator and the designer of the first pyramids, the step pyramids in Saqqara, I believe. Um, don't quote me, it might be wrong, not perfect. But yes, Im or the M would be of, and Hotep, like sometimes I say peace, salam, shalom, Hotep. That means peace or an offering also. Hotep, right? Also, when in peace treaties, things like that, you give an offering or, you give your hand. But yeah, so Imhotep will mean one who comes in peace or one who's peaceful. Could be Mu Salam or Muslim. What y'all think? Let me know what y'all think about that one right there. All right, without further ado, this is episode 139 of the Ansari podcast. Shout out to him. And we're going to get into the Ansari verse. Let's check this out.
Joining us back on the show. We had to take a little break last time because the topic is just so heavy and we ran out of time, really. We're glad to have you back because Ibn al-Arabi is a discussion that could take centuries, really, to unlock and understand. And one thing that I think we left off on last time was his controversial take that many may understand or misunderstand, which is the oneness of being. Are God and creation one? What is Ibn Arabi's true take on this, as you are an expert on his writings?
الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Thank you once again for inviting me on your podcast so we can continue this conversation about the greatest master, as he is known, Muhyiddin ibn Arabi. It's a very interesting topic, the oneness of being, because it's not actually something that he ever mentioned in his own writings. The Arabic term that has been propagated as being a term that's propagated by Ibn Arabi himself is Wahdat al-Wujud, which translates literally to the oneness of being, cannot be found anywhere in any of his writings. It was mentioned once by his foremost disciple, Sadruddin al-Qunawi, and then it gains currency somewhat in the teachings and the writings of the students in what became known as the Akbarian school, or the school of the Sheikh al-Akbar, the greatest master, Ibn Arabi. Ironically, the one...
I don't like that title, the greatest master. But then again, the Ansari podcast, they're non-biased and they let people up there, But that seems, a little wacky right there. Ibn Arabi, who is this guy?
The person who actually gave the term more currency than it actually has in the school of Ibn Arabi is the scholar who aimed to polemicize, to prove the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only necessary existent. He's the only one who is the true real being. There is no other existent thing, including us and the rest of the universe, the planets, the stars, the galaxies, that are also considered being or existing in as much like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists. So the ultimate being and the ultimate existence belongs only to God. In that case, that's how he would understand and explain the idea of oneness of being. That all of us are like mirrors. And actually Ibn Arabi, and not only Ibn Arabi, a lot of Muslim saints and scholars of Islamic...
Okay, I think he might be of the Sufi persuasion. He's talking about saints.
Spirituality, they use the metaphor of the mirror. That imagine yourself standing in front of a mirror. when you see your reflection in the mirror, one could ask, does that reflection really exist? Well,
This can be dealt with the whole hologram or even string theory or simulation theory that scientists go with today. Talking about on how things are built on atoms and such like that, how nothing's really here, but here at the same time, it's very confusing and interesting stuff.
exists so long as you choose to stand in front of the mirror. If you were to withdraw yourself from the mirror, your reflection disappears. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we continue to exist so long as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills for us to be. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala were to will for us not to be, we would cease to exist. So we are very much reflections in the mirror of God, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not in terms of physical form, obviously, but in terms of manifesting His names and attributes, and in terms of being bound and binded by His will.
Yeah, this reminds me of the philosophy and argument of one of our most famous guests, Usama Shurafa, where he says basically that this world is a matrix, that nothing really actually exists, and that Allah is constantly bringing it into creation. That's why when you say, I'm going to do this by the will of God, that's literal, that you're doing it by the will of God. Now, the issue arises with Ibn al-Arabi and just this thought in general. It's similar to what Richard Spinoza's philosophy was, which is that every part of creation of God is in some way attributed to him or a reflection of him. That becomes an issue when someone starts pondering about, about a donkey or about evil or about the devil. And so on. Are we, or about a tree, inanimate objects? Is he saying, or are we saying that God's attribute?
Shout out to Daddy's girl. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yes, this is a very interesting topic. Not sure how long you were here to hear it, but it is very interesting. We're talking about the string theory or simulation theory. The science is saying that this may be a simulation, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already alludes to this in our viewpoints and in the Quran that this is all a test.
Or these other creations are directly an attribute of God?
Excellent question. So
I've teamed up with Pomeroy, a full-service marketing agency founded by a Muslim businessman with over 20 years of experience. Vision Capital has a historical
Al-Sabur, the most patient, Al-Shakur, the all grateful, and then names of Jalal. Names of Jalal are like Al-Qahhar, the subduer, Al-Qadir, the all-powerful, Al-Muntaqim, the one who avenges. And in general, human beings have an adab. We have a responsibility and an etiquette in what to do when we are met with these names. So in general, if the human being or society at large is going through a good period, a time of ease, as it's mentioned in the Quran, inna ma'al usri yusra, inna ma'al usri yusra. If we're going through a time of ease, that's considered that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is manifesting himself to us through one of the names of Jamal, like Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, so on and so forth. If we are met by a period of difficulty, such as, for example, what the people in Gaza are going through right now, in Palestine and in many places of the Muslim world to a lesser degree, it's considered a manifestation of Jalal. But the adab,
define Jalal, just for
Jalal, majesty. So the names of like the subduer, the one who avenges, Al-Qahhar, the Al-Qadir, the all-powerful, Al-Mutakabbir, the one with pride, subhanahu wa ta'ala. The issue with ugliness specifically, like you mentioned, inanimate objects or any other objects that we deem as ugly or evil. For Ibn Arabi, evil is darkness, which is equatable with non-existence, with Adam. Because based on the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he said, "Al-dhulmu dhulumat yawm al-qiyamah," injustice is darknesses on the day of judgment. And it doesn't mean that injustice is not darkness now. Yawm al-Qiyamah means the spiritual realm, the afterlife, that which means the reality of injustice is darknesses. So that means that
Yom Kippur means the day of standing upright, I believe.
evil, such as injustice, is in its spiritual reality darkness. But darkness is actually the absence of light. Similarly, goodness is equal to light, is equal to being. So as we mentioned last time, a saint is someone who exists more to their potential than a sinner or a tyrant. But there is a subtlety here that's really important, which is that a tyrant is always a possible saint. And this is a very beautiful, this is part of the mercy of the Prophet ﷺ, that no matter how much people hurt him, he ﷺ was always adamant about trying to call people to God, because he perceived that there is always a possibility that someone will believe until their time of death comes. So from the perspective of Muslim saints, certainly from the perspective of Ibn Arabi, nothing exists if it does not have a trace of the sacred in them. Because that's what it means to exist. Because if a person exists, if a thing exists, that means there must be a trace of divine wisdom in them. That's why they do exist. And if they do exist, then there is an opportunity for redemption, for them to improve. When it comes to animals like donkeys, there is a story about a lesson that Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam gives to the apostles, to the Hawariyin, his disciples. It is very telling, where they passed by a carcass of a dead dog. And Sayyidina Isa asked the Hawariyin, what do you say about this carcass? And, some of them said, how foul is its stench? Some said, how ugly is its form? Sayyidina Isa said, as for me, I say how white and beautiful and shiny are its teeth. And this is exactly the formula when it comes to appreciating being, let's just say being, wujud, in all of God's creation. What is the wisdom in the donkey? The donkey is incredibly patient. And so that becomes the trace of the sacred in the donkey. Because we might not know this, a donkey, like a mosquito, serves a very, very unique purpose in ecology. Without it, we don't know what kind of instability would happen in nature. The same thing with trees. This actually takes us to another question that perhaps we would discuss, and I think it's worthwhile discussing it here, regarding knowledge, ilm, which is that Ibn Arabi defines knowledge. Ilm, the word ilm, is from alama, which means sign. And he says this is why the world in the Quran is called alam, because it's a matrix of signs. It's basically
Rabbi Alameen, the Lord of all of the worlds, all of the functions, the different levels, the ones that we can see and we cannot see. Okay, and the matrix sees a tangent number. Then you have the intangible decimals.
It's a alama, it's a sign or a group of signs, a collection of signs that points to Al-Alim, which is one of the names of God, who is the all-knower. And this is really powerful because it makes us reframe the very idea of knowledge. What does it mean to have knowledge of a tree? To have knowledge of a tree is not to understand the chemical makeup of a tree. That the tree, it has a bark and it's wood and it's, this much oxygen and this much carbon dioxide. That's not really knowledge in the most sacred sense. Knowledge in the most sacred sense is to decipher something as a sign of God. If you can know how a tree manifests, is a mirror of God's names and attributes, then you truly have knowledge of a tree.
Yeah, this reminds me of the saying that all the world is meaning placed into images. If you can find the meaning behind why the tree exists and why it operates the way it does, whether it blooms for a certain number of months, and then it dies
Yes.
for a certain number of months.
Yes.
That's supposed to tell
Yes.
you something about your own spiritual state, and
Yeah, my father, may Allah be pleased with him, used to say that we all go through seasons in life, you know, and the spring, the being born, the summer will be in the heat and passion of your life, the prime, and then the autumn or the fall, the spring, fall, those are two opposites, right? Um, so the fall will be you're coming into your age, and maybe the gravity is coming down to your genetics a little bit more. You're shrinking a little bit. And in the winter, life is gone. It reminds me of that. All these signs, these ayahs of life. People always say, "Oh, we weren't born with a book, but we were born with a natural fitra." And the first Quran would be the signs of the ayahs of the world around us, which is where Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam was bringing some of his topics to the people, speaking about the moon, the stars, the sun, things of such people that worshipped in his time, but he himself knowing that there's something bigger than all of those. But getting this from nature, you know.
even has a life lesson in it for you.
But I also want to mention that the superiority of the human being is not in regarding him or herself as being better than God's creation. Our superiority is in our potential for knowledge. Right. And that requires an immense humbleness and humility to say plants and animals actually receive revelation from God. It's in the Quran. وَأَوْحَى رَبُّكَ إِلَى النَّحْلِ. Your Lord revealed to the bees to understand that each one of the animals and insects, everything actually, receives revelation. They have their own prayer and praise that we do not understand. So that should be a cause for him for humbleness, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَكُلٌّ قَدْ عَلِمَ صَلَاتَهُ وَتَسْبِيحَهُ. Everything, even inanimate objects, they have come to know their distinct prayer and praise, وَلَكِنْ لَا تَفْقَهُونَ تَسْبِيحَهُم. But you do not comprehend it. So if you do not comprehend it, that means that should cause us to be humble. And that's the basis for why we are khulafa. You cannot be a khalifa if you have any sense of arrogance over the mustakhlaf, over the thing over which you are taking care of.
What does he mean by we or khulafa? What does that mean? Of our family? Or, what is khulafa has a distinct meaning. I can understand us being imams of our family and things like that. What does he mean by khulafa? Okay, we have one Khalifa, and the original Khalifa was Adam, alayhi salam. Everyone wasn't Adam. Adam was special in the fact that he spoke directly for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his trials and tribulations. Other people around him, they weren't the Khulafa. Adam was the first vice regent of Allah on earth.
Requires this thing like, I need this thing. I need animals and plants in order to reach God. That sense of humbleness and humility is actually the very sacred foundation for environmentalism and taking care of the climate Islamically. It's a sacred trust.
That's interesting, and that kind of explains to me better the hadith where the student of knowledge, the fish in the ocean, make dua for him. And one of the reasons is because the fish in the ocean are one of the keystone species as to how the environment is doing. And if you're a person of knowledge, then you should not be destroying the natural world.
And especially now that we understand knowledge to mean deciphering fish even as a sign of God, then that hadith gains that much more, right? That it has that much more kind of impact.
Right. You mentioned that Ibn al-Arabi speaks often about the imagination, and he mentions the imaginal world. Can you tell us what he's talking about with this world of imagination?
Yes.
And how this differs from mere fantasy or illusion?
The imaginal realm, alam al-khayal, is in pre-modern Islamic Islamic metaphysics was was a concrete part of our collective imagination and how we spoke about the unseen. It only got removed from our discourse after towards the 1700s. Prior to that, it was understood that bodies, physical bodies, our human material bodies, cannot access the spiritual realm, alam al-ruh, the world of the spirits, as in its current shape, because our bodies are bound by three dimensions: time, space, the three dimensions of space and time. They're dense and they're made from the natural elements. Whereas spirits and the spiritual realm is non dimensional.
If y'all getting interested in this, y'all like this content coming on and this commentation, please get a thumbs up for us to support the channel. Not asking for your money. I'm just asking for your click. Thank you.
It is not bound by time and space, and spirits are completely subtle. So there is no way for physical bodies to enter into the spiritual realm, and there is no way for spirits in their original form to come into the physical world. So
What do you
there
mean by
has to be.
spirits? Are you defining? What do you mean by spirits?
Spirit is ruh. So ruh is basically what is
But to
called
the
an
Western mind, it sounds like you're talking about ghosts. Are you talking about ghosts?
No. See, this is the thing. When a spirit dresses itself, appears in a subtle form, imaginal form, then it's called a ghost.
Whoa. I'm probably as confused as this brother right here. Look at his face. He's like, what you talking about, Willis? And what is he talking about when a spirit dressed itself as, oh, this is getting spooky? That's an Ahmadi's reaction to that. We're not dealing with none of that spookism nonsense. This is why I think in the Ahmadi community, we need to start speaking more English, or maybe it should be me. Because I know that, okay, Promise Messiah spoke Urdu, but the message isn't getting out. I had no idea about the Jamaat while living in New Jersey. I had to literally move to a whole other country, search high and low for somewhere to pray, um, even losing everything. I found Jamaat somewhere else. I had no idea about it. No idea about it in America. It's really crazy how much no one know. No one really. I think we can just get so much information out more if we simply went to the people with the street teaching and spoke English. Everybody doesn't know how to read, and everybody doesn't want to read, even if it's the message, the message of the Creator of the heavens of the earth. People are lazy and stiff-necked. A quicker way to disseminate this divine message that we have would be in English. That's just one thing I think that should change, because I really had no idea. I've never seen any Ahmadi that I know of prior to me moving out of the country. I've seen some things online. I thought it was just in England. Yeah, it's just something I need to maybe talk to some imams about, because I don't think um, the way our missionaries are going out, I don't think we're actually going to many spots or areas or hitting home, because a lot of Black Americans that followed even the Nation of Islam or Wathuddin Muhammad, the Muslim American Society, they believe in the logic of things and not believing too much into spookism, what we call, or mystery gods. Okay, we didn't believe everything in the Quran or the Bible was literal. You know, we didn't get too hung up on allegorical, but we try to use logical minds, and this is what is taught by Promised Messiah. Mirza Ghulam Ahmed, and I just feel like the message can be disseminated way better. Um, and I think it comes from stubbornness, especially. I understand there's many Pakistanis, but if we want to get this to the world, it shouldn't just be a Pakistani thing. Most of the world speaks English. Um, yes, I understand to find Allah, you must take some effort, but learning a whole nother language, that's like telling a new convert to just, you know, Orthodox Islam. It's like, oh, okay, you can't pray through anything unless you learn Arabic. It's kind of prideful, and it doesn't get our wonderful message out to the world by far.
Use a translation of Professor William Chittick. He uses soul as the translation for nafs, for self. And he uses ruh as spirit as the translation for ruh. Ways, I don't know, they ask you about the spirit, say the spirit is from the command of my Lord. So there is no, if you're seeing a form, even if it looks fantastical, that's not a spirit, because a spirit it could be a spirit that's dressing itself in a form. Jinn are not spirits, are not arwah. They have arwah.
We believe that jinns are not ghosts as well, though. Let's see what he says.
But they have an entirely different being because they're made from smokeless fire. So, and in general,
What does that mean, smokeless fire? Because are we actually made from black mud, from clay? Are we residual clay? Do we melt in the rain? Okay. Can we be molded into things? Now, these things we can allegorically. You understand? If we're left out, if we're not, moist with the wudu of this information, we'll become brittle. So what is smokeless fire really? Is it a fire nation? Is it a fiery tent? When you say somebody got fire under their ass, what does that mean? Is there a sense of urgency or fire in their belly? Or have the gall of something, fiery spirited. These are attributes of humans. All right. Also, when they say the jinn can flow through your veins and things like that, when you have certain emotions caused by the lower brain, such as fight or flight, it sends signals through your body rushing through you. All right. They say the jinn runs through your veins. Your bad thoughts can be these hidden things. All right. Also, jinn can be people. Okay. These things, you're saying they're made of smokeless fire, but these same jinn were chained to Suleiman alayhi salam. These same jinn used to dive for pearls. So is it one word for jinn or is it multiple ones? Because we know the complexity of Arabiya. This is Ahmadi's viewpoint. Thank you.
don't see them because their forms are we are just veiled from seeing them. If somebody sees the apparition, the ghost of a human being, that could be different things. That could be a jinn appearing as a human being. That could be the actual spirit of a human being, a dead human being, or not necessarily dead, but somebody whom God has granted permission for their spirits to roam. But they're not appearing to you in the physical world. And this might be difficult to understand.
Yeah, you tripping right now. You talking about some googly muggly. You talking about some old other stuff right now, Aki. A bunch of stuff you cannot scientifically reenact, prove, or put otherwise. Now, we do believe in the community that some people there's a certain word that was used that was revealed to Promised Messiah. I forget the word, but it's a certain kind of mesmerism or a kind of hypnotic state that some peoples can do. I believe he said Kafirs, Hindus, and Jews can do these things. I'm not sure about that one. I have to ask the Murabi. But yeah, so that was certain things with meditation, with breathing exercises, maybe remote viewing or something like that. But these aren't the souls of dead people.
If you see a ghost, they're not appearing to you. Your eyes are being unveiled to perceive something in the imaginal realm. Right? So sometimes people see certain things and they think that thing appeared out of nowhere. In reality, that thing was there always. It's your eyes that have been unveiled, the curtain was lifted for a second for you to perceive what was already there.
So are
And that's
ghosts
why Allah,
real? Are you saying that ghosts are real? I thought they were just jinn and Americans just didn't know any better.
no, absolutely they're real. I mean, the spiritual world there are creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala other than the ones we know that we don't even know about. وَيَخْلُقُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Allah himself says in the Quran, he creates that which you do not know.
So ghosts
So
are this being that we don't know about in the spiritual realm. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, we call them ghosts, but essentially what it is it's a spirit, a ruh, that has dressed itself in a subtle form, a transparent form, and you're able to perceive that in the realm of imagination. That's
Right.
all a ghost is.
Right, but a ruh, because I speak Arabic, is
Yeah.
soul, right? Or so is it a soul of a human? So are Westerners right that
Yes.
it's a soul of a human?
It could
and
be a
that's
soul of a human
That's a
being.
ghost?
It could be a soul of a human being. Yes.
Okay.
It could be a soul of a human being. It could be a jinn as well.
Okay.
But I think the problem that many Muslims have is that a spirit, once a person is dead, they cannot appear in the physical world. And that's true. But what we're saying is, if you see a ghost, you're not actually, that ghost is not all of a sudden returning to the physical world. It's your eyes that are able to perceive something that God wants you to see in the realm of imagination. You're not even seeing the spiritual realm. You're seeing this intermediary realm in the realm of imagination to receive some kind of communication. In its original form, a spirit does not have any form. We cannot see it with our bare naked eyes. If somebody sees a ghost, if somebody sees an apparition, then what they're seeing is an imaginal form. And this is exactly the vision that Sayyidina Maryam had. Because Sayyidina Jibreel, in his original form, he cannot be perceived by the naked eye. And that's why what's mentioned in the Quran is فَتَمَثَّلَ لَهَا بَشَرًا سَوِيًّا. He appeared to her. He dressed himself in a form of a handsome young man, of a perfect man.
Yeah, and that,
right? And actually,
tamathala is similar to mathal, which is example. So it's almost like he gave an example of a human.
Exactly. It's actually from the mithal. Mithal means parable and also means a subtle form, because they serve a same purpose. So when Sayyidina Jibreel appeared in the form of a perfect man, it is meant to be an approximation of the reality of Sayyidina Jibreel as the archangel. And similarly, the purpose of a parable, of a mithal in language, is that it's actually meant to approximate the meaning, because certain meanings cannot be understood directly.
Wow.
I mean, that's why in Umrah or Hajj, the main act of worship is to go around the Kaaba.
Yeah, why is that?
Is not to go directly through it, right? We go around it. And here is an interesting Arabic connection. The word tawaf, which is circumambulation, right, is related to the word taif. Taif means ghost. So tawaf is from the same word, same root as taif, which means ghost. And actually, one of the verses of poetry in Imam al-Busayri's Burda is Na'am sara taifu man ahwa fa'arraqani. Yes, the ghost of my beloved passed before me and kept me awake. But why is tawaf related to ghosts? Because the way especially men dress during tawaf, and in general, women dress either in white dresses or black dresses, we have this kind of look like ghosts. It's because we're dressing in such a simple dress that we're transcending our materiality and we're drawing closer to our spiritual or imaginal realm. So that's why it's called, there is this relationship with tawaf, going around the Kaaba, because it's meant, that's exactly how accessing meaning, spiritual meaning specifically, happens. It doesn't happen by a rational domination of meaning. It happens through approximation. So khayal, this is the way it works. And Ibn Arabi actually says that spiritual knowledge is always imparted through ishara, through allusions, not directly. It is not like a lab manual. And this is why art is important, by the way, because art functions entirely through allusions and metaphors. And when you don't have that in a community or society, you lose touch with the unseen even. If you remember last time you were asked me a question, which occurs to the minds of many people, Ibn Arabi is talking about this really fantastical stuff. Are these visions, or is he, was he taking something? And what I said was that it's because we have been so disconnected from a genuine, intimate relationship with the unseen, despite being a religious community, that we begin to perceive when people talk about, journeying to the unseen or stepping into the imaginal world, it can't possibly be real. But this is a symptom of modernity. So alam al-khayal. Now, for Ibn Arabi, he describes two senses of imagination. There is what's called connected khayal muttasil, connected imagination, and disjointed khayal munfasil. So connected imagination is our own faculty of imagination, which is connected to us. That's why he calls it connected imagination. Because the human beings, we don't just have the five senses, we have other faculties as well. We have the rational faculty, we have memory, which is a faculty, and we have the quwwa mukhayyala, or imaginative faculty. And then there is a realm of imagination, which is like the barzakh body, or when we go into a dream. Actually, even now, in our waking state, we are in imagination. And here there is a very beautiful
That again goes back to string theory, assimilation theory, and also in Abrahamic religion saying that this isn't really real.
lesson from the seerah.
We spoke about Barakah. That's why I teamed up with Habba.io, a Muslim-founded site that allows you to put your favorite nonprofits all in one place, offering and say, I can do something about this.
Except milk. Except milk. When it comes to milk, the Prophet ﷺ said, oh Allah, bless us in what you have sustained us and increase us from it. Not give us better than it, increase us from it. What's the connection? Well, that's the same prescription that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us in the Quran for asking for knowledge. He says, قُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا, say, my Lord, increase me in knowledge. So then that means if you have a dream where you see yourself drinking milk, when you wake up in the physical realm, you have received knowledge. If you drink milk in the physical world, in the spiritual realm, you are receiving knowledge, which means that everything that we experience in the physical world needs to be interpreted like a dream. This is very much in the Quran. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Mu'minun, He says, when we ask them, قَالَ كَمْ لَبِثْتُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ عَدَدَ السِّنِينَ, how long have you lived on the earth? They said, we only spent a day or a day, because when we wake up in the afterlife, we'll think that this whole life is a dream, which it is. In comparison to the reality of the spiritual realm, remember I said in the last session, this is not reality. But it's also not completely worthless. Because this is a trick. Some people think, well, this physical world is not important at all because it's not real. No, it is very much real. It's very much important as a metaphor is to understanding meaning. But you need to interpret it. You need to interpret everything that's happening to you, because you are also in imagination. In this realm that you're living in, you are in imagination. So if you have dreams, you're accessing imagination.
Okay, so let's say that someone has a dream that is clearly an indication of their subconscious, their fears, their anxieties, their self-esteem issues. You know, they're worried about like if they're in a relationship or they have a job, they get a dream where they get fired, or if they're in a relationship, they have a dream where they get cheated on. What's happening there? Is that a spirit trying to tell you that you're about to get fired, that you're about to get cheated on? Like, what are we?
Yeah, because what sometimes we have dreams, and this might have happened to people, where a dream is a story that is happening, and then all of a sudden the story of the dream, like let's say your alarm is about to go off in 5 minutes and you're sleeping. You have a dream where the dream goes through a story, and it just so happens that the alarm harmonizes exactly with the world of the dream, where you hear the alarm in your dream, but as part of the dream, as like a train passing by. How did that happen? How did it happen that something that, you know, is happening in the physical world is actually appearing in the spiritual, in the imaginal realm, in your dream? And how did the story of the dream harmonize so well? It's like there was a director who was directing the story of the dream so that your alarm appeared in the dream as part of the story of the dream. Well, because they're connected. Because what's happening in the physical world is being governed by the spiritual world, including the alarm that you set. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control. And so all of these things manifest in the realm of the dream, which is happening at a higher level of reality than the physical world. And yes.
Yeah, but like
yeah.
I have a friend who's extremely loyal. He would never do something like that. And his spouse always gets dreams of him cheating on her. And it's just her own subconscious, it's her own insecurity. I have friends or people, or I myself have had dreams where, you know, you get fired or something bad happens in your career or
This brother been working. He is sleepy.
your wealth, but then nothing ever
Exactly.
ends up happening.
Yes.
So how do you explain
So
that?
in that case, it is traditionally thought in dream interpretation that if two people have the same dream, one might not require any interpretation while somebody else requires a lot of interpretation. By the way, it's the same thing for sickness. If two people have the same physical illness, they should not get the same medication, because what puts one body into equilibrium is not what puts the other body into balance. They're completely different. So dream interpretation depends on the spiritual and emotional state of the human being. Sometimes there is a source of where the dream is coming from, but it's being veiled by layers and layers of social trauma, social conditioning, emotional state. If you have for example, people usually have bad dreams when they're sick. Like they have a dream where they're falling off a bike or they're falling off a cliff when they're physically ill. There might be, what's happening is that there's two things here. There is the original source, the original message that's trying to come to you from the spiritual realm, and then there is the interference. So all of that affects our imagination.
So what that, I mean, because before I used to be just perplexed by this verse in the Quran where Allah says that He throws the false idols, that the false idols with the disbelievers are thrown into hell, and I'm like, wait, but the false gods are not idols; it's actually false gods, and I'm like, wait, but the false gods doesn't exist. Like Zeus doesn't exist. These Egyptian gods don't exist. So what is God throwing into hell?
Now we know.
About?
I know.
That's interesting that he said that right there.
It's mentioned in Surah Al-Anbiya, I believe. You and what you worship beside God are the very coal of hellfire. Now we know through classical archaeology that ancient Greeks and ancient Egyptians did not perceive these gods as multiple gods as we would think about it today in the age of monotheism, of Judaism and Christianity and Islam. They perceived these very much like we perceive superheroes today.
Mm.
The reason why there was very elaborate stories about Zeus and Hercules and Athena and Hermes and Poseidon and all of these, which we today call gods, is because if you're a normal Greek person and you're going through your life, you're having trouble at work, stuff is not working at your house, you're having marital problems, you go to visit Mount Olympus and you hear these stories being retold. The purpose of any mythology, like Epic of Gilgamesh from ancient Mesopotamia, is you have a human being with larger than life powers and abilities who also has weaknesses. And if you see the transformation of that human being, and if you read Joseph Campbell's The Power of Myth, that's exactly what he talks about, or the hero's journey, is that a hero leaves their home, they go through a journey of transformation, they return home transformed, but in the meanwhile, they have helpers, they have villains or antagonists, and they have shortcomings. And they have to overcome their shortcomings and overcoming and defeating their villains or their antagonists and their enemies through the help of their aides in order to come back transformed. That's the way in which Greek mythology functioned in classical Greek times. They didn't look at them as multiple gods as we assume today. They needed these stories in order to make sense of their everyday life. And the closest example, now each one of these, by the way, the remarkable thing about mythology, if you go from Greek mythology to Roman mythology to ancient Egyptian mythology, is each of these, what we so-call gods or characters, represents an archetype. For example, Hermes is a messenger. That's an archetype. That's somebody who delivers a message from one person to the next. Zeus is the god of lightning. That's an archetype. Hades is the god of the underworld. That's an archetype, right? Athena, and then the hero is an archetype. Odysseus is an archetype. All of these characters are an archetype. Ibn Arabi talks about archetypes in terms of prophets. Prophets are archetypes. So every prophet represents an archetype. We have prophets. Consider for the fact that Poseidon is considered the god of water. Sayyidina Nuh, Prophet Noah, he was given the power of water. Right?
What are you talking about, Sufi? What are you talking about? Nuh was given the power of revelation. Okay. Nuh was giving the blessing of prophethood. Now you're getting wacky, Mr. Sufi. You're getting effing wacky right now. Okay? What you talking about? This Meshuggah talking about over here, huh? Just jokes. It's all jokes. I love the Ansari podcast.
Because that's an archetype.
Prophet of the flood.
Exactly. Being in control of water. And saints represent archetype.
Noah was not in control of water. Allah is the control of water. You got to listen to these people. Don't let their flowery language go over your head. What are you talking about? That moon roof you got up there, boy. That half a stash you got right there, boy. Two-Face? What are you talking about?
The whole purpose of the archetype is that you, as someone who's treading your everyday life, you want to feel as though that the small troubles I'm having are actually meaningful in the scheme of the universe, of the cosmos. So if you can find your archetype, and hey, for the ancient Greek person, I'm a fisherman, right? So I'm having the same problems as Poseidon. If I can listen to the story of Poseidon, maybe I'll find some meaningfulness in my life so that I don't feel like I'm just a peon, like I'm nobody, with in front of all these rich people in ancient Greece and the Senate and the emperor and all of that. And similarly, for Muslims, we have the archetypes. The archetype of the Prophet ﷺ, the archetype of Prophet Nuh alayhi salam, the archetype of Sayyidina Isa, the archetype of Sayyidina Musa, who was also given control over water with his staff.
But let's just make a distinction that these aren't myths.
They had no control over anything. You're misconstruing this. Allah performed these miracles as a sign to the people. His prophets had control over none of these things. Okay, these are signs from Allah. He is deviating from the Quran. On that note, we're going to go to the next chapter. This is filth.
Prophets, and they're not.
But here's the thing. Here is the thing. Of course, it's not myths. Our prophetic stories are not myths. Into the afterlife, including musical instruments, including
this is a little bit of a detour, but I'm so curious. I need to ask you: do you think that the Egyptians had a lost technology that we don't know about?
Oh, absolutely.
I personally know the founders of humanity. We've actually had one of them on the podcast. And what makes humanity different is that they believe that this ummah is meant to carry each other, to build one another up. They don't focus on problems, but solutions, from solar-powered water or more. And you'd like to work for one of the fastest growing startups in the world today, then head over to elif.build/network-tap or press the link in my bio and apply for free today.
There is a connection between ancient Egypt, ancient Egyptian language, and the sacred knowledge of Prophet Idris, alayhi salam. Now, Prophet Idris, who is one of the, Quranic prophets, in the Bible, he's known as Enoch. He's also known as an ancient teacher who's known as Hermes Trismegistus. Hermes Trismegistus means the greatest master, which is also a title that's given to Ibn Arabi later on, of course. But one of the Muslim historians, Al-Maqrizi, very well-known historian, he mentions a story that when Ibn Arabi arrived in Cairo, he visited the pyramids and he entered a very deep state of meditation when he saw the pyramids for the first time. And when he awoke from his meditation, he told his students that it was actually Prophet Idris, alayhi salam, who ordered the building of the pyramids. Because
all of them, or just some of them, or what? Do you know?
All of them. He ordered the building of the idea of a pyramid because he had knowledge of the flood of Sayyidina Nuh, and he was afraid that Allah will send another flood, in which case all the
what is he talking
sacred
about?
knowledge
What?
who ordered, and the sacred knowledge of Prophet Idris, alayhi salam. Now, Prophet Idris, who's one of the Quranic prophets, in the Bible he's known as Enoch.
Allegedly, he's known as Enoch. You got to be specific with that. Also, who told you that who he is? Okay, we got to stop putting our beliefs in front of a lot of these facts. All right.
He's also known as an ancient teacher who's known as Hermes Trismegistus. Hermes Trismegistus means the greatest master, which is also a title that's given to Ibn Arabi later on, of course. But one of the Muslim historians, Al-Maqrizi, very well-known historian, he mentions a story that when Ibn Arabi arrived in Cairo, he visited the pyramids and he entered a very deep state of meditation when he saw the pyramids for the first time. And when he awoke from his meditation, he told his students that it was actually Prophet Idris, alayhi salam, who ordered the building of the pyramids. Because
all of them, or just some of them, or what? Do you know?
All of them. He ordered the building of the idea of a pyramid because he had knowledge of the flood of Sayyidina Nuh, and he was afraid that Allah will send another.
Mind you, Idris is before Sayyidina Nuh.
Flood, in which case all the sacred knowledge that had been revealed to prophets since then would be lost. And so the purpose of the pyramids would be as a storehouse, as storehouses for knowledge. And
how are they going to be Another one after he knew about the flood. So you built pyramids before the flood to keep knowledge after the flood in case another flood was coming.
So it is thought that much of the knowledge of the ancient Egyptians is actually the knowledge of this what's called hermetic knowledge. If you hear the term hermetic knowledge is in reference to Hermes Trismegistus, of course, a lot of people deny that Hermes Trismegistus even existed, or that it is, or even that it is Sayyidina Idris. But it's the unique connection here is that the word Idris.
Yes, that Trismegistus. Yes, that's definitely in those esoteric knowledges and things like that. I want to find something for you all since we're getting esoteric up in here, and I just love this history, even if it's fact or opinion, fiction. Um, I can always find you know something equivalent or hinting to the in the Quran. Actually studying Egyptology, being a Hotep myself, a self-proclaimed Hotep, um, it is something in there in Surah Buruj. We're gonna get to it in a minute. Hold on, let's let him speak.
Why is Sayyid? Where does his name come from? Idris alayhi salam is from darasa, which is to teach, because he's the first one to teach with the pen. He's the first one to write with the pen. So the idea of recording knowledge.
Okay, like a madrasa. Okay, so like the names also, these names aren't just actual names of people. Sometimes they're alluding to what their position was, what they would do, and even the allegorical, symbolic stories around them, which is what Promised Messiah teaches us in Ahmadi Muslim community. So, okay, that's a good one. Idris, teacher. Okay, the first writer, the Kalam. All right.
Is first traceable to Sayyidina Idris, number one. Number two, his name is also what's called a contronym, meaning his name includes.
So the Trismegistus, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the emerald tablets of Thoth. Okay. That's supposed to be Hermes in Greece, Thoth, Jehuti, the writer in ancient Egypt. So this is Sutu Buruj 58. Okay. And this would be mine. It is I include Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim in mine. So that would be the first ayah. So this is going to be ayah 18 of Buruj. Has not the story of the host come to thee, of Pharaoh and Thamud? Nay, but those who disbelieve persist in rejecting the truth. Allah encompasses them from before them and from behind them. Nay, but it is a glorious Quran in a well-guarded tablet. All right. Was the Quran ever written down on a tablet? Quran also means recitation. I mean, emerald tablets of Thoth is something believed to be in space and has all knowledge of everything and things like that. We also believe in the Kalam. All right. The Kalam was the recording situation that wrote down Allah's will.
An opposite meaning to teaching, which is in darasa, which is the fifth morphological form in the Arabic language, which means to go extinct, for something to go extinct, to disappear. So the reason we record knowledge is to preserve it from extinction. Ibn Arabi, interestingly enough, he actually positions Sayyidina Idris as the teacher of philosophers. So he even says that the teacher of Socrates was Prophet Idris alayhi salam. And you take that for what it's worth, that the knowledge of this deep philosophical knowledge that Plato and Socrates, especially the earliest Greek philosophers had, is actually prophetic knowledge that we can say was distorted later on.
And it felt that way. It felt that way. And the fact that they've lasted and their names have lasted for as long as only prophetic names have lasted. Like no one outside of the realm of Moses and Jesus and Muhammad and Adam and Noah have lasted for thousands of years, except Aristotle and Plato. It's very strange. And one of the things, if you look at, I studied philosophy. When you look at Plato's remarks of Socrates, he sounds like he is a monotheist, especially when he's in an
Yes.
argument with Euthyphro in front of the courtroom. But
Yes.
we won't go into that. Well, because what's interesting also is I believe Aristotle is the one that said my Egyptian friend when he went and visited Egypt. Apparently, Aristotle visited Egypt, or maybe that Egyptian friend came to him, and that's where we get the theory of Atlantis in the first place. It's from
Yes.
Aristotle, which is this
Yes.
city surrounded by water.
Because these are collective imaginations. This is inherited knowledge. And actually, the only philosopher that Ibn Arabi loves immensely is Plato. He even has immense disagreements with Arab philosophers like Al-Kindi and Al-Farabi in terms of their perception of the unseen and their understanding of God. But he so much as he goes as far as calling Plato Aflaton al-Ilahi, Plato the godly, the divinely inspired, because there is something very sacred about the emanationist perception of reality that Plato had, and eventually would become Neoplatonic theology vis-a-vis Spinoza and Ibn Sina and others in the Muslim world that Ibn Arabi connects to very much. That any Muslim saint who's had an unveiling and kashf of reality, they perceive it very closely to how Plato and the Neoplatonic school perceives it. So there is definitely a common heritage here.
So, what do you think the relevance of Ibn Arabi is today? I mean, with everything that Osama has taught me and everything that you've been teaching me, what's his relevance, and what's the relevance of everything we've been discussing?
MashaAllah. I think, and this is really at the heart of my work, especially when it comes to, so much of my work has to do with creativity and the arts. And I was born into an artistic family. And when I came across Ibn Arabi's teachings during my PhD study, I found a very harmonious kind of overlap between not only what he talks about, but the way he talks about it, because he has a very creative approach to language, to Quran and Hadith, that is emanating from his own mastery of the Islamic sciences, that I've come to be convinced that the most impact he can do today is actually in helping artists in all mediums understand so everything we do and everything we go through in the physical world has to be regarded as a metaphor.
Yeah, but we all feel like Moses right now dealing with these Israelites, huh?
Exactly.
So how can modern people, with the advent of AI, with all video games, all these VR sets, AR sets, how do we understand Ibn Arabi's sacred imagination now with this new advent of AI and consciousness and so on?
And I think that's a beautiful question to sort of end this episode with as we transition to the creativity episode. I think the first thing that Ibn Arabi behooves us to do is to liberate ourselves from a post-colonial tendency to live in a cultural silo where we regard only our art as being sacred and everybody else's as demonic. This is not sustainable for a genuine cultural growth and coexistence in today's world. The basis for introducing your own art in or your own stories, let's just say that, in a larger society begins with the humbleness of recognizing the sacred in what really we can call pop culture. If you are unable to perceive God's wisdom in pop culture of your time, you cannot, it's heart to heart. People will never perceive your own stories as sacred because you're already proceeding from a place of arrogance. These people don't know God. I need to teach them about God. Whereas God's will is already working in the world, and Islam has always come not to do away with people's culture, but to enhance people's culture in its own terms. So, for example, if you take dress code, we don't have a single monolith of Islamic clothing, Islamic cuisine, Islamic art. Islamic dress looks differently in Morocco than Senegal, than Turkey, than Spain, than Malaysia, than Egypt. Islamic cuisine the same way, Islamic architecture the same way, Islamic writings the same way, Islamic music the same way. It sounds different because it's like, beautifully it's been described that Islam is like clear water. It's not a static object. Islam is clear water that takes the shape and the color of the container that it's in. And that's a cultural container, including the individual container of the individual, the istidad of the individual. And a community, a society, a people have a disposition as well, collectively. Certain societies are visual societies. Certain societies and communities and people and nations and tribes and civilizations are auditory. They're auditory learners. You cannot project we're a text-based people, so we have to teach, we're only going to communicate our religion through text. You're going to lose everybody if you communicate that way, especially if you dismiss the arts. So the first thing that Ibn Arabi wants to teach us, especially with imagination, is to pay attention and to listen attentively to the already existent sacred in society. And
So,
that
Dr. Ali,
yeah.
how does that how does that apply to AI? What
Yes.
are your feelings, or how would Ibn Arabi react to AI today?
It's always about deciphering, and I actually mentioned AI in one of my books because I have a master's in AI. I mentioned that in one of my books, Nostalgic Remembrance, Sufism and the Breath of Creativity. I wrote a postscript at the end of the book about AI-generated art specifically. The conversation today is somewhat superficial about AI-generated art having to do with copyright issues, stealing from human artists. But really, the ultimate issue about AI art is that human beings, if a human being faces, if a machine faces a division by zero, it crashes. When human beings face in their life the proverbial division by zero, we produce art. In other words, human art, genuine human art, comes out from a place of brokenness, fragility, perplexity, contradiction, paradox, helplessness. The people of Gaza are a perfect testament to that. They're facing insurmountable odds, and they're singing, and they're playing guitar and giving music lessons and playing the oud and so on and so forth. A machine could never do that. A machine, when faced by such insurmountable odds, it goes into survival mode, and for that purpose, art is trivial. That's not how human beings function. But there, in what I just did, in comparing AI-generated art, in using that as a mirror to understand human-generated art, is precisely where I think how Ibn Arabi would want us to approach AI-generated art. I don't know if many of your viewers remember Terminator 2, which is a movie that I saw when I was very young, maybe 6 years old. And it was a very poignant movie for me to watch at that age, because the movie is about machines overtaking the world and launching the apocalypse. And right after I watched that movie, or right around the time I watched that movie, the first Gulf War happened in Iraq, and I was a 6-year-old child experiencing that. So for me, Judgment Day or the Terminator, the story of the Terminator actually kind of came true, and I experienced it. At the end of Terminator 2, one of the main characters, Sarah Connor, in the extended edition of the movie, she has a very powerful line. She says, "The unknown future rolls towards us. I face it for the first time with a sense of hope, because if a machine, a Terminator, can learn the value of human life, maybe we can too." And this actually tells you exactly the sacred wisdom, despite all the shortcomings, of what AI is going to do at a spiritual level, vis-a-vis Ibn Arabi's teachings. Human beings, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as I mentioned, for us, we human beings are mirrors wherein Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reflects over the perfection of his names and attributes. This is an imprint in human beings we create in order to reflect on our shortcomings. And AI is actually a perfect mirror that will eventually reflect back to human beings what makes us truly human by seeing everything that the AI machine cannot do, including at the most basic level, it cannot produce art from that genuine place of brokenness, paradox, perplexity, contradiction, fragility.
It also will always serve the one who created it, the companies that fund it. They always will have curving questions that they will initially give you. I personally have found AI to lie and apologize for it. The first answer will always be politically correct on whatever is the geopolitical jargon of the area. Know that.
And once we perceive that, I believe even on a smaller scale, an underground scale, is going to make us appreciate what truly makes human art unique, in that we're the rose in the rubble that keeps standing. There is this paradox. It's going to make us appreciate the paradox and the fragility of being human. And I think that that's ultimately the spiritual significance of AI.
Very interesting stuff. Thank you for coming to Freedom Boulevard. Shout out to my two viewers that was here. I might have lost you when I had an important call, but review this guy, these brothers on Ansari podcast, the Ansari verse. All right. Love this podcast. It's very informative, very progressive. You know what I'm saying? We would need a young Arab brother to be able to do this, because the older ones, they will not let all of this, you know what I'm saying, all of this different viewpoints be allowed. All right, those Afro Hadiths. But thank you so much for coming to this here commentation. This is brought to you by Kambushka.
Shit feels so good when you drink it. Yeah, you can drink and eat organisms. It kills all the shit in your body, all the dirt and the mold that you got in your shit, dog. You know what I'm saying? We all got bacteria. You know what I'm saying? But I don't even know the name. Bunchy. That's the name of it. What? Kambushka. Organism. Enzymes. Prohibitats and be whatever the detox. You need it, dog. So, plug on yourself with this shit. Organism, alright? One. That shit made me feel like I was in a movie, nigga. That organism and shit had me like, go over there and touch up. Oh, you need organism.